Zack on the line. He has deep, deep expertise in marketing, worked with dozens and dozens of firms, has trialed and errored hundreds of different marketing approaches. Zack, I would love for our audience for you just kind of start a little bit about your journey and what your growth has been and kind of what you're working on now, and then we're going to dive right into marketing and all that and you've learned.
Thanks for having me. First off, so I'll give you a little bit of background into my journey in this industry. So I started out in digital marketing and web design about 10 years ago, and ran a sort of generalist agency for a number of years. And after a while, that became a bit of a difficult challenge to get new clients. It's obviously a very competitive market. And around that point where I was realizing I needed to make a change, I happened to just coincidentally work with a couple of different recruiting companies at the same time. And after sort of exploring their business model and looking at the industry a bit further, I became quite interested in it and decided that I was going to become a recruiting marketing agency. Now, at that point, it was a bit of a difficult path because I had not worked in recruiting and didn't know much beyond what I had learned from these couple of clients. So I decided that in order to have any credibility and also gain the expertise that would be needed, I really did a very deep dive into the industry. I ended up cold emailing dozens of recruiters in order to get them to speak to me and discuss their challenges. And then I decided to see who I could convince to work with me and test out some of my initial ideas. Not surprisingly, some of those worked, some didn't. But over the past few years, where it's led us is that we're now, I now have a team of people, who I work with, and we've tested a ton of different ideas for how to market and grow your recruiting business. And I think we have a very solid approach that can be applied to any recruiter, whether that's a small firm just starting out, or a mid-sized firm, or even a larger firm. We do know what works and what doesn't, and how you sort of build your business, gain new clients, as well as new candidates, which can be important for some recruiters as well.
Yeah, yeah. So walk me through, when you first connect with a recruiter and you're gonna, do kind of a discovery call or a consultation call. What are you guys usually discussing on that call? I kind of want to get a feel for how you think about this and how you approach it, because people watching right now, they're basically going to kind of get a free consultation just by interacting and seeing how you approach that first conversation.
Sure. So our discovery call is pretty well structured at this point. So of course, I'm going to get some background on the company, things like target markets, the number of clients they have, number of employees, to really get a sense of where they're at in their own life cycle. But then it quickly moves on to, I think, the core part of the call, which is, how did you grow your business today? What channels did you use in order to get where you are today? Because that gives a sense as to what you're doing, where there might be opportunities for improvement on those within those channels, as well as what new channels might you be able to add to your business development toolkit so that you can grow the business. And so in terms of the existing channels, what I'll often do is, ask people, I'll give them a list of sort of possibilities. Where are you growing your business? For those that are online focused, I'll then kind of dive in a bit deeper. So for example, sometimes people say, yeah, I use email, right? Well, a lot of people are using email. So I'll want to know, do you have a process? Like, how do you build your email list? Do you have a process in place to send out emails on a regular basis to people, whether that's new clients or existing clients? I want to really understand the details of what you're doing, because that's really where some of the gaps can sometimes be found. And when it comes to new ideas, what we'll do is, I'll sort of share some initial thoughts as to where potential, opportunities might lie. And then if there is a mutual interest, we would proceed to a second call where we actually dive a bit deeper into that and kind of scope out what a project might look like. The goal of both of these calls is, it's not a sales call in the sense that it doesn't work well if you're hard selling anyone. There's
Yeah.
going to be value that you'll get out of it, in that at the very least, you'll have a good understanding of, what your next steps might be, whether that's with Talent Hero or, on your own.
Yeah, you've been playing in this space and trialing and erroring, so many different marketing approaches and techniques. What do you see working now? Like what are kind of your go-to tools that apply pretty broadly that seem to be successful, and what have you seen that is just a waste, like people are doing and they're kind of following an old cookie cutter and it's just not working? I'd love to hear that.
Sure. So, I mean, it's a big question, and I can sort of start by laying out maybe the high level outline of what sort of we do, because it
Hmm.
really comes down to a three-part approach, and it's essential, I think, to get each one of these right. So the first part is really starts with your website. You need to have a website that can effectively sell your business. So that means it makes a strong first impression. And that's typically done with good design work as well as engaging copy. I've looked at many, many recruiter websites, as you can imagine, and I would say that it's a pretty small percentage that really meet those two criteria.
Yeah,
A lot of these,
they're not good.
yeah,
I don't know
they're
what
not,
to tell you. Like
yeah,
I do
no, they're,
executive retained search, and I've looked at the other ones, and I'm like, I guess they're all getting like the same free WordPress template, and I'm like, this doesn't look good at all.
right. And it's such a competitive market that, you don't want to look like you're just a one person shop who, even if you are, like, that's fine, and you can be transparent about that in other ways, but like, it's not a good impression to make when someone lands there and they're like, this is not, I don't know about this company. You don't really have that leeway with a new lead. So it's really important to have those, design and copy in place. Next up on your website, I think, is social proof. So, social proof is anything that indicates to somebody that you can do what you claim you can do. And again, given the competitive nature of the industry, it's tough to stand out. There's no, let's say you're a life sciences recruiter. Well, you have hundreds of other competitors doing that. So things like, testimonials, well written testimonials, logos of the clients you've worked with, case studies, those can really go a long way to proving your value. So really, you get those in place on your website. That's really important. The next thing, which I think a lot of people sort of forget about when it comes to digital marketing strategy, is, well, how are you going to get people to come to your website, right? I think this goes back
Hmm.
to your questions in terms of what channels work, right? Um, and we found the most success with SEO, search engine optimization, so ranking your business on Google for keywords that people are looking for. Cold emails, well written, with emails that are really well targeted. And these are things that people don't always get right, those two elements. I've looked at lots of badly written emails sent out to the wrong people, and not surprisingly, they don't convert. And some form of paid advertising can work as well. Again, the devil's in the details there, right? Where are you advertising? What do your ads look like? Where are you directing that traffic on your website? What do you want the person to do? I mean, these are all very complicated. It's easy for me to sort of explain at a general level, but actually executing these ideas, is not that straightforward.
Of course, you take a
And
super tailored, very thorough, detailed approach. Yeah, it's
yeah,
abundantly clear. Like it's like for you, it's really about diving in and looking at the things, and then it's about optimizing. Like
that's
that.
right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly. We it's rare that we come across a client who is really like nailing every aspect of this, because it's not something that a small firm without a full-time marketing person is likely just going to get right. It's complicated. I think the last process, which is important, is how do you follow up with these leads? So, it's one thing to get the leads, it's one thing to get someone to your website, but what do you do when they don't convert right away, which is just the nature of business? Most people don't convert. And I think a lot of people just let those leads fall off. They just, they send a few emails, they make a few phone calls, they don't get the response that they're looking for, there's not immediate interest, and then the person sort of disappears, out of sight, out of mind. So I think having a proper follow-up process in place is really quite important.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize this for everyone watching. You know what Jack just said, that we tend to do outreach as recruiters looking for clients, couple calls, couple emails, didn't get a response, see you later. And it's just really important to clue in on what Jack's saying, that you need a consistent follow-up process that stays in touch so that over the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, however long, you're able to capture that business. So what do you recommend in that space for follow up? Because I'm always trying to strike a balance between, reaching out too much and, does my content land? Does it not land? So, I'd
Yeah.
love to just kind of hear, just general thoughts, that you have on that follow up process over, maybe a 12-month window.
Sure. It's a good question because it is quite difficult to really send out content to people that's actually of value to them. What I see with a lot of recruiters is low quality newsletters that
Yeah.
people are not going to open because whatever is in them, whether it's like poorly written blog posts or just straight up like sales pitches, why would I want to open that, right? Like there's nothing in it for me. And I think you really need to think about, well, how do I give something back to people so that they continue to stay engaged with my content? So I think there are a number of approaches you can use. I think the one approach that many recruiters have been using for quite some time is the most placeable candidate campaign. So you find a great candidate that you then market to, a broad audience as somebody who, might be of interest to them. Now, I think, again, doing this correctly is not always so easy. I've seen campaigns where, the approach, the targeting of this person is way too broad. If you
Mhm.
have a 5,000 person email list, it's pretty unlikely all 5,000 people are the right person to send this one candidate to. You need to think about what industry are they in, what function within a company are they in, and really figure out how do you segment that properly. Um, Another thing you can do, and a thing we've had a lot of success with as a marketing approach, is a salary guide. So creating a salary guide, basically listing out all the jobs in your industry, and then figuring out what the salary ranges are for them across at the sort of the different cities that you operate in, and then sending that out to people is a great way to sort of demonstrate the value that you bring, your subject matter expertise, and it can be a really good way to restart a conversation that's gone dead. And I think lastly, if you do want to write a newsletter, I think you have to think about it from a different perspective than the way most recruiters approach it. It's not an area where I've seen a lot of recruiters have success. And it's not something, but I think there's a big opportunity here, which is that, if you are a recruiter in a specific industry, which I think, most good recruiters are, they're focused, you should be thinking about a newsletter that talks about the whole industry, not about the recruiting aspect of it,
Mhm.
right? The people you're wanting to talk to, they don't want to hear about recruiting, how to conduct an interview, how to review a resume. I mean, it's not a core part of their job, and they probably already thought about it quite a bit. So again, going back to the life sciences example, how can you create a newsletter that's life sciences focused, where you're sort of demonstrating your expertise on a constant basis, getting people to actually open it because they're like, hey, this is going to have interesting content on my industry. And then you're sort of tangentially kind of marketing yourself as a recruiter. Because I think,
Thi-
remember, like people will come to you if you're the life sciences expert and they know you're a recruiter, then of course you're going to be their life sciences recruiter.
This is so valuable. Like, I really want to hone in on like how important it is. What I'm really hearing you say is put yourself in your client's shoes. Like,
Yeah.
really tap into what is it they want to hear. Like, you're so right. Other recruiters might want to hear stuff like that about like how to interview, how to tweak a resume, that kind of stuff. But like, your clients don't. And like, if you're not putting out content that's valuable to them, they're not going to be engaged. So this is
Right.
so important because like this is where that like longer term follow-up strategy is really coming into play, where it's like you're still remaining top of mind to them. Like they
Yeah.
may be in a need, right? And then they read your newsletter and you provided value to them that they just respond back, hey, do you fill this kind of role? You know, and it's like, oh, it's this beautiful opportunity right here.
Right. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. I think a lot of recruiters are guilty of just copying what they see work in other industries without really thinking through how if that's applicable to their industry. So like, they hear social media. Well, of course, everyone uses social media. Like, how can I get on? What can I do with social media? And I think social media can be a great way to find candidates, but it's really tricky to stay to use it to find new business. And if you're pitching just recruiting stuff over and over again, it's not going to work. But if you're just sort of talking about your expertise and sharing interesting posts about your industry, again, much like a newsletter that focuses on that same tactic, people will understand that you know what you're talking about. So it's really just about refining it to your audience and recognizing that recruiting is not like some of the other industries that you may be familiar with.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So to pull it back to the newsletter, like I'm pretty nerdy when it comes to recruiting. So I mean, of course, when I launched, I signed up for the newsletters of like every recruiting company that I could find. Uh, I haven't seen a single one do it well. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering if when a client comes to you and they're like, "We're going to do a newsletter," how much time do you spend trying to talk them out of it? You know what I mean? Because I'm like, because I've seen so many and they're just not well done, and I know that to do it right, they've got to be committed.
Yeah. So it's a good question. I would say that it generally falls into two categories. So sometimes we have clients, typically larger companies, who have bigger budgets. And in that case, we can say, listen, we can build you these high quality newsletters. It's a lot of work to
Hmm.
actually put this
Mm-hmm.
together on a monthly basis. But it can get done if you want to, if you're able to write some original content, and you want to curate some additional news articles to go with that content, we'll produce a newsletter that people are actually going to get value from. For the smaller companies, they're not likely going to pay us. We'll sort of guide them on a path to how they might want to do this on their own, because I think it is doable if you're willing to commit the time. Now, in practice, what really happens, I would say most people don't listen and they just send out the newsletter they wanted to send out in the first place. And much like you, I get some of these newsletters, some of them from my clients, and I just am like, I don't understand why. I know who your
Yeah.
audience is. Like, why is this what you're sending out?
That
It
is
just, it
such a
doesn't make
bang your
sense.
head against the wall moment where you're like,
Yeah.
I literally am here to support you in optimizing
Hmm.
like in optimizing what you do. And you're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, let
Well, I
me let
think,
me ask this
yeah.
real quick. So Zach, let's pretend, I'm, kind of a solo shop. It's just me. I'm not going to do a full newsletter, but I do want to do some quality content. So, some sort of email progression or LinkedIn post progression to kind of stay in touch with the hiring managers and kind of, brand myself like an expert.
Yeah.
What types of content have you seen do really well? Because and just for context, the 9 tips for interviewing, the 5 no, it's like that's all. I feel like that's all been burned for the most part. So
Yeah.
I'm curious, in your experience, what you still see landing that recruiters watching this right now go, oh, cool, I can create something around that and plug that in and start getting traction here.
Right. So, I mean, first, I think the most placeable candidate stuff does work if it's executed properly. If you have really good candidates and you're in a market where it's hard to find those people, they're not just on the market all the time applying to your jobs, and you write well-written profiles for them and send them to the right people, you will get a response.
Mhm.
There's a lot of sort of, ifs there, right? Like, you have to do these things correctly, but that I think is something that a single recruiter on their own can do. Um, and I think the other thing is if you can't produce the content because, just being realistic, you only have so much time in the day. You may not be able to write a really insightful article even once a month, right? Like, I know that people have these aspirational goals when they start out, that like, how hard is it to write a blog post a month? Well, the answer is it's very hard.
Yeah.
Like, given the failure rate I've seen, like, you would imagine, like, it's hard to imagine how hard it actually is, but like, my sort of data suggests that you're probably going to fail unless it's something you really enjoy doing. Um, so, if you fall into that category, one thing you could try to do is take a content curation approach, right? So you're probably coming across a lot of interesting stories within your industry. If you could just take maybe 5 of them per month, write a little summary of each article, why it's relevant, maybe, one sentence or two describing your thoughts. That might be a way you could get content out there more regularly without doing all the work required to write it. And I will say that, like, regardless of which approach you take, I think that the people who have success doing any of this stuff on their own are those that build processes for it. And again, my experience has been that the typical recruiter is not very good at this. And it's not, certainly, my area, our business doesn't really, like, we'll help people with this, but we're not like a process building company for recruiters, so I think it's something that, probably finding a good trainer or somebody who can really help you think about these processes is quite important, because again, I've seen recruiters just wasting so much time doing things that are just so inefficiently done. And if they had a better process in place, they would probably be able to find some of that time to do the marketing work that they're not able to currently do.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And your team, I mean, you guys are basically, a CMO and a marketing, manager for these individual firms. And correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are really strong SEO, design, email, pay per click. Like, is that expand on that a little bit,
Yeah.
just so people watching kind of know, when they want to go deeper and learn more from Zack, like, here's kind of what his team, focuses on.
Yeah, so I think that you pretty much nailed it. It's really about strong website and then driving traffic through SEO, emails, and then pay-per-click ads. It really does, I think, depend. Of course, these things depend on budget. It depends also on timelines. How quickly do you want to get traffic? I think the optimal situation is that you build a website, and at the same time, you're working on building an email list and writing some good cold emails that you can then send out as soon as that website's done. And then the longer term play, you think about, well, how do I improve my SEO? That's going to take time, especially if you're a new firm. It can take 6 months to a year to really start ranking. And there's no real shortcuts to that. So, but it's a good to, I think, have that short-term plus long-term approach, so that a year from when you start, you have leads coming in from multiple different angles. And again, paid ads is another way to sort of to get some immediate results.
This is definitely like a very strong marketing funnel. It's about like a long term. It's not really like on the front end. It's not like a quick, but it's like a consistent campaign that you can optimize and improve.
Yeah, and I think recruiters, again, maybe critical of recruiters, but there's obviously
we tend to drop the ball on things.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
I think what happens with recruiting, from my experience, is that recruiters have to. It's a very tough job to do on your own. I mean, any job is, but you have to sell you have to sell the new jobs, right? So get open jobs that you're going to then fill, and then you have to source the candidates as well. So it's like two very distinct jobs, and it often, I think, leaves you with little time to think about where are these leads coming from. And I think what some recruiters do is they just kind of grind it out. Like, I think and that can be quite successful if you have that drive, right? Like, I know recruiters with terrible websites who make 40 cold calls a day. and they've been doing it for, I know one guy who's been doing it for 2 decades. I mean, the thought of doing that to me is
Mm,
unimaginable, but
mhm.
this guy probably makes $1 million a year doing that. I think most people are not going to make 40 cold calls a day for 20 years. So, if that's not you, I think you have to think about how do you optimize, right?
Mm.
Get everything figured out, map everything out, and then execute that plan. And recognize you're probably going to have to change things over time and build on that plan. Like, as a small recruiting firm, you're not going to be able to get everything you want right off the bat. But so figuring out what's most important to start and then go from there.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And Zach, for people that want to learn more, go deeper, connect with you, where do you live? Not where you live, but
Your
online, where do
address
you live?
specifically. They'll
Your
show up
address,
knocking.
please. Yes, your address, please. Social security number, date of birth. If you could just kind of tell them, how to access you or how to get in touch.
Sure. So, I mean, if you go to our website, which is talentheromedia.com, there's a couple things you can do there. First, we have a ton of free resources available, so that you can check those out, download them. That will get you added to our email list. But I've really tried to, I've wrote all of the emails. Tried to make them actually have value for you.
Mhm.
And you can also, through our website, of course, book a call. We sort of discuss what would happen on that call. So that's a good place to start. And if you want, you can actually send me an email if you do have an existing website, and I offer a free critique of that website.
Oh, that's
And I think
awesome.
yeah, so that can be a good place if you do sort of, know that your website needs some work. That can be something you can do as well, is just get in touch. The email address on the website.
And I know you have a free gift for our audience. Will you share with them what that is?
Yeah, sure. So the free gift is, it's an ebook that I wrote. It's called The Recruiter's Guide to Online Marketing, and it will actually walk you through all of these different steps that you need to take in order to build out a marketing plan. It's a good amount of work for you to do it on your own, but it is possible if you have, I think, the patience and can really put the time in over the course of a few months.
Great. And I mean, like, that's fantastic. You're right. Like, that's so thorough and detailed. And like, if you really like, that's such an important key part. If you put the work in, you can have good results from it. And if not, that's exactly what you're here for, like, and that's
Yeah.
fantastic. There's another option. So you guys, to get that free gift, just scroll below and click the button. And then, Zach, what's the biggest thing you want to leave our audience with?
I think that we talked about a lot of different ideas on this call, different channels. Talking about your website, and it's a lot. It's clearly like there's a lot to do, and I think the people who have success are those who are able to just map out a plan of attack week by week and figure out what are they going to do each week, and then hit those targets. It's really about execution. Lots of people have great ideas, but unless you actually go out and do it, whether that's on your own or with the help of a company like ours, it doesn't work. And when you do, though, it does work. And I think sometimes people people don't really follow through. But we have a lot of clients who have really had pretty tremendous results. Doubling, tripling the size of some small recruiting firms. So it does work, but it's not. There's no quick fixes.